I think just to let you know a little bit about myself. Like she said, my name is Courtney. I've worked in mental health for a long time, about 17 years. Kind of my background, my undergraduate degree was in criminal justice, and I really wanted to work in the court system and that type of thing. But when I really got into it, I realized a lot of folks in the criminal justice system and probation have substance use issues and mental health issues. So I chose to go more in the rehabilitative route, and that's how I got into counseling. And I have a master's in substance abuse clinical counseling, and I've done lots of different work. I've done individual group substance abuse counseling. I've done crisis work, walk-in clinics where people get referred to detoxes, involuntary commitments, things like that. And I also done a lot of work with like our complex populations, which are folks that have co-occurring disorders like schizophrenia and substance use disorder. So this presentation today, I wanted y'all to just kind of have a good foundation for what addiction is. So it's, we're going to talk about opiates, but this is going to be for any level of addiction, whether it's alcohol, marijuana, whatever. I want y'all to have a good understanding. So from sanity to insanity and back again, the highway to addiction and the path to recovery. This is what I'll talk about. So these are just some of the objectives for today. I want y'all to understand the process of addiction. The diagnostic criteria, we'll talk about that. This is the DSM-5. This is kind of like our Bible in the mental health world. This is how we diagnose everybody. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Principles of treatment, relapse, and recovery, and understanding and identifying the signs and symptoms. So at the end of the morning, y'all should get a little bit more. So these are things that we hear a lot. When I tell people that I work with substance users, a lot of times their reaction is like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? Because there's a lot of misconceptions out there about addiction. It is something I enjoy doing. Not everybody is cut out for it. I tell people I didn't choose the mental health field, the mental health field chose me. I really do enjoy what I do. But these are some of the things that we hear, that you have to hit rock bottom in order to change. That addiction is a choice. This is very controversial, and people are entitled to their opinion. Just by a show of hands, do you think addiction is more of a choice or a disease? If you think it's a choice, raise your hand. Okay. Thank you for your honesty. A couple people, okay. Who thinks it's a disease? Okay, so we see a few more hands in that. So you see it's kind of the old nature-nurture debate. Addicts are bad, crazy, or stupid individuals. I will tell you, I work with some of the smartest people you will ever meet, because it takes a full-time job pretty much to keep up a pretty intense drug habit. So I've worked with some really bright people in the field. This kind of goes to our court-ordered population. You have to want treatment for it to be effective, and that is not always true as well. People with addiction should not be treated with medications, and we'll talk a little bit about like methadone and things like that shortly. And treatment for drug addiction should be a one-shot deal. I can tell you a lot of the people that we work with, they don't always get it the first go-around, and that's okay. That's what we're there for, so people will come back when they do have a slip-up, just like with any other disease. And then people don't need treatment. I hear this a lot. They could stop if they really wanted to and have the willpower. I can tell you a lot of the people I work with, they don't want to be that way. They absolutely don't want to be that way, but the biology of the addiction takes over their lifestyle. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay. So these are just some of the realities of what we see in the addiction world. Substance use disorders can develop despite a person's best intentions and their strength of character. Like I said, I work with really smart, good people from good families all the time that develop addictions. Some people are addicted to more than one substance, complicating their efforts to recover. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but it's not uncommon for people to present to us and they're using, say, alcohol and opiates, or alcohol and marijuana. They're using several substances, so it's kind of hard to narrow down. And there are different factors in someone's life that can play a role in the development of a substance use disorder. And I got this all in caps, but trauma is a really big one, and there's a lot of studies being done right now with that. A lot of the people we work with have history of multiple traumas in their childhood and early adulthood. Family history, I've treated people from grandparents, parents to kids and grandkids that have history of addiction, mental health issues, and other types of life experience. Okay. So this is something that, I say, nobody ever says, I'm gonna grow up to be a drug addict. You know, when you're little, what did you say you wanted to be? What did you guys want to be? Police officer. Yeah, I'm real flexible. I want y'all to have some dialogue with me. So, what else did y'all want to do when you were younger? Other than a police officer. A teacher. A teacher, okay. So that's what people want, I mean, that's what the average person, they want to aspire to have goals, a career, a family, that type of thing. Have you ever heard anybody say, I would grow up to be a drug addict? All right. So this is a little bit about the continuum of use. You know, addiction is on a spectrum, and I like this visual aid. This is kind of abstinence down here. I mean, we do have people out there that are completely abstinent. They don't drink, they don't do anything whatsoever, that are going to follow this into the spectrum. A lot of our teenagers and young adults are going to fall right in here. It's very common that our kids experiment, try marijuana, alcohol, things like that. That is kind of what we expected in the day and age that we're in. Social use is a little bit more escalated. And this is where things are a little bit controlled. It might be the kid that's drinking on the weekends, things like that, after the football game, that type of thing. The people that we see in our world, they're on the side. They're on the abuse and dependency. They're out of control with their use. They might have physical or psychological illness with the substance. So this kind of tells you what kind of problems, so it breaks it down a little bit. On this side, there's really any problems. I won't say it all the time. You know, sometimes we get teenagers or young adults that get underage drinking tickets. They might get caught on campus with alcohol or marijuana in their vehicle, things like that. They get referred for services, but they fall in this category. Even sometimes people with DWIs, I've seen, come on in, sweetie. Seen people with DWIs that just really have made a stupid mistake, maybe out celebrating for their birthday, things like that, and they can still fall on this side of things. But like I said, the majority of people we see are going to be on this side. They've got school, employment, relationship problems, legal issues, financial issues, and eventually they develop health problems like cirrhosis or Hep C, things like that. All right. So the DSM-5, I showed y'all this. This is our diagnostic criteria. I'm going to just pass this around so y'all can see it. This is all the different, sorry, it's not me up because I used a lot. That's all the things that we can diagnose somebody with behavioral health issues, and that can be from depression, anxiety, panic attacks, schizophrenia, substance use disorders, that kind of thing. So I'll pull the criteria so we can talk about that a little bit more. If you look at the DSM-5, this is the clinical definition. Cluster of cognitive, behavioral, and physiological symptoms indicating that the individual continues to use the substance despite signs of a problem. These symptoms include reduced control of the substance, cravings and a strong desire or urge to use, social and interpersonal problems, increased tolerance for the substance, withdrawal symptoms. And this can be just when they reduce use. It might be a person that's drinking a fifth a day and they can't afford to buy a fifth, so they drink a little bit and they can go into withdrawals because of that. Distraction with obtaining and using the substance and persistent use of the drug despite adverse consequences. Hey, how are you? So these are some of the things that we see in the early addiction process. People begin to avoid situations in which drugs or alcohol will not be available. They may not go to church anymore because they know they're not going to drink or use drugs when they're in a church setting. That's a good example. They're preoccupied. They're rushing. They might be binge drinking, binge using drugs, things like that when they have the opportunity to do so. Increased tolerance, blacking out, sneaking drinks or hiding usage from others. We see this a lot. Families might find hidden liquor bottles, things like that in the closet where the person's trying to hide that. I knew somebody that we worked with, the family would find hundreds of liquor bottles hidden throughout the house, the car, things like that, or lying or minimizing use. So this is when it starts to escalate. Think about that spectrum. Middle addiction, you see some guilt over recurring use. Drinking, drug use to relieve negative feelings. It becomes a coping mechanism for them. They don't deal with things effectively. Family or friends are complaining about their use. They begin to avoid family and friends. They don't come around quite as often as they used to because they don't want to be confronted about what's going on. Loss of relationships. This is a big one right here. Drinking or drug use alone. Once people get to the point that they're furthering in their addiction, they don't want to share with other people, so they do start using alone. That's a big sign. And also job problems. This right here, sometimes we see employers that will say, you know, he's a really good employer, I really don't want to say anything to him. You know, he shows up every day, he comes to work, he does a good job. Yeah, we know he drinks or uses drugs, but we don't want to fire him. So that can be a problem, but you can see how that person gets a little bit enabled in their situation, and we hear that kind of it as well. So this is the latest stage of addiction. People begin to have withdrawal symptoms, and that could be physical and psychological or a combination of both. Health problems, depression, and suicidal thoughts. We get a lot of people that present in our local emergency room that are suicidal. They don't want to continue living because they're so depressed about how their life has turned out. Loss of relationships, some of these kind of go in hand, job loss. Reverse tolerance, that's when the person needs less of the substance to get the same impact, an overdose or death. And he's going to talk a little bit more about overdose a little bit later, but I will tell you one thing, we have to do a lot of education of folks that are getting out of like our hospitals and detox facilities, because once the person gets the substances out of their system, that's when they're most likely to overdose. And we have to make sure people know that kind of information to try to keep them safe. So why do they do the things they do? If you've been in our world, you hear this a lot, doing the same things over and over again, but expecting different results. That's the definition of a sin. Any questions so far? All right, so this is just talk about brain chemistry. I'm not going to go into too much detail, just because it can be kind of boring, but this is just 2 slides or pictures that shows you a controlled brain and then a cocaine abuser. And you can see the yellow and the different parts of the brain that changes with years of use. So just know that things do change with your brain chemistry. It's not just a behavioral thing. Okay. So this kind of talks a little bit about the biology of addiction. A person takes the substance which activates the same brain circuits as do behavioral linked to survival, similar to eating, bonding, and sex. You get those feel-good chemicals going in your brain, your dopamine, your serotonin. It serves as this level in your brain, which results in feelings of pleasure, and the person wants it more and more, okay? Just as food is linked to survival, drugs begin to take the same significance for the individual. So that's just like eating, sleeping, all those basic needs. The need to obtain and take drugs becomes more important than these other needs. And that's when you see people start self-neglecting. They're not eating, they're not sleeping, they're not doing the things that they really should be doing because that drug or alcohol is taking over. This is something we do here a lot. The individual no longer is using it for pleasure. They're really sometimes aren't even getting high anymore. It becomes more of a lifestyle they're maintaining, but relieving the stress. And eventually the drive to seek and use drugs is all that matters to the person, despite devastating consequences. Control and choice are lost to the addiction process. So these are just some negative coping skills that we also see with addiction, and you might be a little bit familiar with some of these. Chemical dependency is characterized by a delusional system that prevents him or her from seeing the nature of his or her problem. So we hear this. People don't think that alcohol or drug is their problem. They think it's the person that's confronting them. If you would just leave them alone, they would be okay. That's kind of how their mind starts to work. Chemically dependent people will try to hide their problems, and we see a lot of lying, manipulating, and controlling other people. Has anybody ever been around somebody with an addiction? What kind of behaviors do you notice?
Argumentative.
Okay.
Everybody else is involved.
Yes. I'm sorry, I can't hear. Money, okay, so maybe somebody that has a job and are supposed to pay the light bill, maybe they don't have lights now because they're putting that towards their habit or food, that type of thing. So everything else around them becomes the problem with them that project. And denial, this is an ego defense mechanism that operates unconsciously to resolve emotional conflict. and to allay anxiety by refusing to perceive the more unpleasant aspects of their reality. All right, so why do people need treatment? Tell me, when I say treatment, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What do you think? Sorry, say that again?
Like a rehab facility.
A rehab facility, okay. What else? Okay, like getting the drugs or alcohol, like a detox, okay? And this is one thing, and I've heard officers that work in law enforcement say the same thing. You know, in our world, everybody thinks that you have to go to a rehab center for treatment, and that's not necessarily the case. We try to keep people as close to home and their family supports as possible. But we're going to talk about the different levels of care and treatment in this process. But yes, some people do go to an inpatient rehabilitation center, but you know, a lot of the people that are in our world don't have insurance. So do y'all know how much it costs per day to be in an inpatient rehabilitation center?
My son went for 3 months and it was $131,000.
People don't have any idea of the cost behind it, truly. We authorize bed days for people that are inpatient for mental health and substance abuse, and it can be anywhere from $800 to $1,200 a day to be inpatient. Because if you look at that level of care, you're looking at doctors around the clock, nurses, and let's see, Stephanie back there from chair. I mean, you've got round-the-clock care for people. You're having to feed them, house them, all these different things. It's very costly. So we have to be really, we have to budget our money, and we're a state agency. When the money runs out, it runs out, and we have to make that money stretch as long as possible. And you shared about how much it costs. Not everybody has that kind of money, okay? I would say 90, 95% of the people we see are uninsured. They've either lost their jobs, especially our males, they don't always qualify for Medicaid. And our females, sometimes they have Medicaid because they have children, but the way our system works, if people lose their children to DSS or the court system, they lose their Medicaid too. So then they also become a burden on the taxpayers, but all that money is coming through our tax dollars. So these are I like this book, I want to say it's called Uppers, Downers, and All-Arounders. I'm not going to go into detail with each alcohol, drug, and all this, that kind of thing, because I think y'all probably have a good understanding. But this is what we see people requesting treatment for the most. Right here, right now, is alcohol, heroin, opiates and synthetics, and that's going to be your methadone and fentanyl. Benzodiazepines are really on the rise. We're seeing a lot of Xanax and things like that out there, and other prescription medications. When people are having withdrawals, that's when they tend to come into our system. These are other substances that we often see, cocaine or crack, if you wonder those. Crystal meth is kind of big in this area. Drugs can be really regional, I would say. If you're in a more urban area, you're going to see more heroin and things like that. Heroin use kind of goes around methadone clinics. But when you get to more rural areas like Sampson and Duplin County, you see a little bit more crystal meth, definitely in this area. You see other prescriptions, Ritalin, Adderall, marijuana, inhalants. This is more big with like our high school, college age kids. You don't see that a whole lot with adults. I can tell you, I worked at an inpatient rehab, and I caught one guy puffing Freon out of the air conditioning one time. So when people were desperate for a high, they would pretty much find anything. Hallucinogens, they kind of come and go. We see nicotine in e-cigarettes. Sometimes people, when they present for treatment, they want to get clean of everything, including nicotine, so we try to help them with that type of thing. Caffeine, see how you're drinking coffee? I'm picking on you, you got your coffee? I know I should coffee every day, but that's considered a substance too. And then these right here, there's no way I could list them all, but these are just some of the other drugs that we see out there: bath salts, Molly, crocodile, embalm, syrup. You know, as this, in 10 years, we may not even know, the drug may not be invented yet that we have a trend in. Like right now, it's opiates and heroin, but we don't know what's going to be invented tomorrow. That's why it's really hard for the laws to stay ahead of things. I worked with a guy that was addicted to bath salts. And that's a real complicated thing because it was not showing up on drug screens at the time. So we saw a lot of people going into our local emergency rooms that were highly psychotic. They were very paranoid. They were aggressive, they were volatile. They would give them drug screens and nothing showed up. The only drug screen at the time, you had to like send off to California or something, far away. By the time that got back, the crisis was over. They were out of the emergency room. So we could not pinpoint that it was a substance. But these folks out there are smart. Anytime they outlaw one thing, they'll twist a molecule, and then that's a legal substance. So I see all the law enforcement feel they're agreeing. So everything that we see, like I said, there's somebody out there that's one step ahead of us trying to legalize something else. The gentleman that I knew that is going to share this story with the bath salts, he ended up getting in an accident and killing somebody. They could not prove it. And so, he literally got away with homicide because they could not prove that he was in the system because our tests were just not sophisticated enough at the time to prove that. But we knew on the treatment side of things that that's exactly what happened. He was actually going to scrap some copper or something like that, was in an accident, killed a person, and that's what ended up happening. It was a really sad situation. So what other trends have y'all noticed with drugs? Any other ones? When you think back to the 80s and the 90s, crack and cocaine was kind of a big man. Right now we're into the heroin and the opiates. But drugs can be really trendy. That kind of thing. All right. So this is a little bit about what we do in treatment. I'm going to talk to you all about the assessment process and the patient placement criteria. We kind of touched on that a little bit and the levels of care. So we do a lot of different screening tools. I'm going to start with actually this one right here. We do the biopsychosocial spiritual interview or assessment. That's really, really important to find out all elements of the person. One thing we try to do, we are a state agency obviously, but spiritual can be really important. If a person identifies that they have a strong support system through a church, we do try to tap into things like that because that might be really effective in helping them get clean and sober. These are just some other tools that we use. The CAGE is a 4-question. The acronym is, the C is, have you ever tried to cut down your drinking or drug use? I know the E is an eye opener. G, guilty over your use. And A, I think is annoyed. Has your family ever been annoyed? So it's a 4-question thing that we can do pretty quickly, and that helps us with our assessments. These are just some of the others. All right. We look for strengths and weaknesses in the individual, just like with any other assessment. We look at if they have any family support available out there. I mentioned earlier, sometimes our families are very dysfunctional. If the person is living in a home where the parents are using, the grandparents may be there and they're using, it's going to be really hard for them to get clean and sober. So we have to look at alternative placements for them to help them. Employment history, do they have maybe an employer that's really willing to work with them? And this is really hard to measure, but internal motivation is really key. And it's really hard to measure how motivated a person is or what motivates them. Sometimes people say, I want to get clean because I want to get my kids back. And we try to encourage them, you need to get clean for you first. Get yourself together, then everything else will fall into place. These are some threats to recovery. Criminal behaviors, we've got some law enforcement, but some of your mental health, any physical health issues, family influences, employment, homelessness, HIV and AIDS. When we get people that they have a lot of these different things going on and they present to us, sometimes they're just a complete mess. It's hard to know where to even start with them. If they don't have housing, they have no financial support, they have no insurance. They have so many of these things going on, it's like, where do you start? It gets very complicated, especially if they have untreated medical issues too and no insurance, like diabetes or high blood pressure. We run into lots of issues like that. I'm not going to go into this in a whole detail, but ASAM is the medical kind of criteria that we look at. The higher the person is in these dimensions, the higher level of care they need. And that's going to be, so we mentioned inpatient rehab, detox, that kind of thing. If the person is at a withdrawal risk, if they have medical conditions and complications, that could be diabetes, COPD, different things like that. Emotional behavioral conditions or complications, that could be a psychiatric or co-occurring disorder, which we'll talk about a little bit more. We talked about it's harder measure internal motivation, but treatment acceptance and resistance. Is this person really wanting to be here, or are they here maybe because their probation officer told them they had to be here? That could be a different motivating factor. We also look at their relapse potential and their recovery environment. So a person that might be homeless, no housing, with some of these medical issues and psychiatric issues, they're going to need a higher level of care, which would be possibly inpatient facility. That's called AC. This is just kind of a visual of the different levels of care that we commonly refer people to. Inpatient could be like your 21, 28-day programs, which those get shorter and shorter actually. Or residential might be programs like TROSA, where people go for like 2 years, or Hebron Colony, places like that are out there. We have intensive outpatient. That's where people go to groups several times a week for a couple hours. They might be there 3 times a week doing groups, and then they transition down. Outpatient treatment might be something to maintain them after they've completed like a group therapy program. Okay? And pre-treatment education, this is going to be more your stuff that's in the school system. We do prevention stuff in schools with Sampson County. But that's where commonly people fall. Like I said, not everybody gets to this level of care. That's real important to know. Somebody that presents to us that may have a full-time job, an employer willing to work with them, we might get them in and they do evening groups 3 times a week. They get to keep their job. If they are compliant, their family stays together. There's lots of different things that can benefit them from being in like an outpatient program. But what happens, we constantly have to reassess. That might not work for the individual, and we have to refer them to an inpatient program if they're not doing well outpatient. So it's a constant reassessment. So these are the goals of treatment. We want the person, of course, to be abstinent. We want their functionality and family work in the community to improve and reduce criminal behavior. One thing I want to say about this is abstinence is not everybody's goal. And that took me a long time, and I see some heads shaking. Can I pick with you for a minute? Yes, because you know I know you. What would you say to that statement? Do you think abstinence is everybody's goal?
No.
Okay. Do you mind elaborating? Because I'm a little bit.
I just don't feel like it is, because some of us have different goals. I mean, it's not so much evidence, it's just we lower use or something, you know, not much of the days and
And it took me a long time to kind of come to that realization, but a lot of our folks, they really struggle with that. They want to go back to music maybe on the weekends. They want to go back to the way their use was before it was problematic. I see some, so abstinence is not everybody's goal, and when you see multiple relapses or return to use, that's people trying to figure that out. There's a great saying I read somewhere: you can turn a cucumber into a pickle, but you can't turn a pickle back into a cucumber. Once people get to the point on the dependence side, they're not going to go back to just social use, but they've got to figure that out on their own, and that can be a very complicated and long process. These are just some other goals of treatment. We want the drug use at least to go down, minimally, if not absent. We want crime to go down, because all these law enforcement folks in here, people with addictions, they tend to be in our criminal justice system, correct? They're keeping y'all busy. And when these things go down, we see employment go up, and then we have more taxes in our system, our economy improves. So it all kind of plays, it's a cause and effect type thing. All right, so this is just a little bit about money. I find that this is really helpful. We talked about the cost of the inpatient treatment program and how much that runs. The cost to society of drug abuse is $180 billion per year. That's a lot of money. This is always really interesting to me, and I'm sure these numbers change over time. This is just the data that I had. Being incarcerated, whether it be jail or prison, is about $18,400 per year. Having somebody in a methadone maintenance program, and that's generally something they pay for out of pocket. Insurance doesn't always pay for that. It's $4,700 per year. So look at locking somebody up that has an addiction versus treating them in our community. I mean, it can be much more cost effective. And then other studies indicate that every dollar invested in treatment can yield up to $7 in savings. I will tell you, in our world, when money gets cut, it also falls in the prevention side of things, unfortunately, because money is always tied to numbers. And we have to show numbers and progress in order to get programs funded, and it's very difficult to show the effectiveness of prevention. So that can be a struggle in our work as well. These are just some other things about treatment. No single treatment is appropriate for all individuals. We could take everybody in this room or a family member, if they had issues going on, and each person's treatment process can be completely different. We have to look at that individual and what's going to work for them. Sometimes the first thing we do for them doesn't always work, and we have to try different things as well. Treatment needs to be readily available as well. That's a big challenge in our state. One of the state guidelines is if somebody calls East Point, and I'll give you all that call center number here shortly, and requests substance use services, we have to see them within 2 days, because we have to catch them while they're ready, they're motivated for treatment. The problem is we don't always have beds and appointments available. If somebody calls, say, on a Friday evening, that means we have to see them by Monday morning, and we have to be able to finagle all that with our system, and that can be very challenging at times. If somebody wants a detox, what if all the detoxes are full? What do we do then? So there's just lots of different barriers to people getting help. Treatment must attend to multiple needs of the individual, not just their drug use specifically, and multiple courses of treatment may be required. And remaining in treatment for an adequate period of time is critical for treatment effectiveness. That's one thing, we have to do a lot of education with families because they think an individual might go to a program, they're going to kind of come out cured, and that's really just the beginning. That they're learning new skills, they're learning about their addiction. People didn't get that way overnight, and they're not going to get better overnight. We have to make sure families understand that as well. I really like this slide because it shows you a little bit about what treatment's all about. And I'm going to get you guys this PowerPoint if y'all want it, so y'all can have this information to take with you. But this shows you all the different things we have to do in the treatment world. Like I mentioned, when people come to us, sometimes their life is a complete mess. It could be a disaster, and we're trying to help them rebuild. We might have to help them coordinate childcare. Who's going to watch their kids while they're at their appointments? What if they go inpatient and there's nobody to watch their children? There's all kinds of different things we have to work through. Families need services, we need housing, transportation, financial services, legal services. Some of our lawyers and some counties are doing expungement workshops. That's one thing we see people that get in recovery, they really want to go back to work and support their families, but if they have a legal record, that can be a barrier to them getting back on their feet. And that can, make them more depressed and things like that. We see a lot of AIDS, HIV, hepatitis C, because we're seeing a lot of increased IV drug use. Educational services, helping people get back in college, get their GED or high school diploma. Medical services, mental health services, vocational supports. These are all the different things that we have to look at and refer the individual to. So treatment should target factors associated with criminal behavior. We look at not just their drug or alcohol use, we also look at their criminal thinking. Like I said, people do all kinds of extremes to get their drugs or alcohol. I'll tell you, one guy I worked with, I'm going to forget this story. This has been probably 15 years ago. It's one of my first cases I had. He would rent, I guess they're like the old school Impalas that the police used to drive. I think they were called Impalas. He would go rent one on the weekends and drive through downtown area with a park with his parking lights on and act like he was the police. And people would drop their drugs and run. That's how he got his drugs every weekend. And I was like, if you could put that much energy into, I was thinking the things this guy would do, and I just have never forgotten that story ever. But that's how he didn't have the funds. I don't think he was working, but that was how he got high. On a regular basis, he came up with enough money to get that Impala with it. So, but I just think about, that's pretty brilliant if you think about it. So we have to look at the behaviors along with the substance use. Antisocial values, anger and hostility. We see a lot of anger management issues. If somebody's using substances to help them cope with anger and stress and that kind of thing, they don't know how to handle it without those things. Problem solving. This is really good. Conflict resolution and life skills. I mean, before I worked in the field, I took for granted, I'm lucky that I had a good childhood, but if you work with a family that has maybe a very limited education and support system, they lack basic life skills. They don't know how to budget money. They've never been taught some of these things. So we've become lots of roles to these individuals. We have to teach them life skills at times because they did not learn it growing up. Attitudes towards school and work can be different. I've heard this a lot with our young people. Why do I want to go work at McDonald's and make minimum wage when I can sell drugs and I can, live well? I mean, that's really hard to sell to a kid or a teenager. Mental health problems and other family functioning. Okay. So I wanted to have some conversation about the challenges that we see in treatment. This in Sampson County is huge. Transportation. Sampson is a huge county just to get from one side to the other. And I can tell you a lot of the people I work with do not have valid driver's license. So even if they want treatment, they may not have a way to get there. So that can be really challenging. Appropriate treatment of what's the T off there that's limited. Like I said, people call in. We have to respond within a 48-hour or 2-day window to get them into, say, a detox bed if that's the level of care they need. Well, if they're full across the state, people go on a waiting list, unfortunately, and that's not really a good system either. We just have more demand than we do supply beds. These two kind of go together, but we talk a lot in our department about stigma and shame. Going to a doctor for diabetes or a heart condition, is okay, it's acceptable, but people have a really hard time talking to people about their addiction. They're very ashamed of it. They have to hide a lot of their behaviors from their family, their friends, that kind of thing. So that kind of keeps them sick for a while. Same thing with small town confidentiality. We're here in Sampson County, even though it's a big county, a lot of people know each other here, right? So, I've heard this, it's like, okay, well, I don't want my car seen at that clinic because people will run my head that I'm there for that. So I don't want to go there. So we do work with our surrounding counties, Duplin County, Wayne County. It is not uncommon, especially if we get somebody well-known in our community, which happens a lot, they do not want to be treated in the same county they live. So we try to work it out where they can go to a surrounding county. We do that quite a bit. We've actually had to do that with law enforcement in the past that needed some treatment, and we do whatever we can to break down those barriers. Okay. We also do more social programs. If you think about it, when people are drinking and using drugs and things like that, sometimes all the people they hang out with are also doing those things, right? So they really don't have any social supports without it. Some communities are coming together and doing like recovery centers, which is, they used to call it social detox or something like that back in the day, but an area where people can go that's safe, they can learn new skills, they can take classes, things like that. They can have groups, AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery. Those are really great things, but those are just really catching on across the state. But hopefully in a few years we'll have something like that here in Sampson County. Like I said, everything requires money at the end of the day, we know this. We have to show numbers in order to get funds. So some of these programs, we can't have this what we call feel-good programs, that we go in, it feels good, like we've done a good job. We have to have numbers and results at the end of the day in order to get grants and funding and things like that. This is huge right now, adolescent treatment beds and detox. We have a lot of 17-year-olds on opiates. The ages are getting younger and younger, and I know I was talking to somebody in here earlier, we have 8 and 9-year-olds on juvenile probation. I mean, we're getting kids much younger, using substances. Our systems have not caught up yet, and that's really a struggle. So if we have somebody present at Sampson Regional ED, 17, they might be using opiates or heroin, whatever, there are very limited places across the entire state that we can send that person to. They just don't exist. Our state is struggling to keep up with this epidemic. What are some other barriers y'all think to treatment? And those are just a few of them. What are some other things you think people may not access treatment for?
Because a lot of things you have to get information for, you have to have parents around for, and there's no way for those who have to receive treatment, and then their parents are not able to do it themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do see that a lot. We have to have permission. The way it works with substance use in under 18, we still have to have permission from the child. The parent has to sign the releases and consent, but we don't have to tell the parent everything. We do have to let the parent know if they are like danger to self or others, there's major crisis situations, but we want to protect that child so they'll get treatment. So there is that kind of lapse of information sometimes with sharing information with families. That can be a struggle. Also with our kids, sometimes there's so many agencies involved, that gets really complicated too. They might have a court counselor involved with them, DSS might be involved, the school system. There's so many agencies involved in having to coordinate all those people for the best interest of that child can get really challenging. All right, so what are some of the best ways to treat substance use disorders? And it can be one or a combination of these things. Behavioral therapy or psychotherapy. You might see the acronym MAT or medication assistance treatment. That's going to be things like Suboxone, Subutex, methadone, things like that. It can also be even using antidepressants or anxiety medications. This is kind of a combination of behavioral therapy and medication. We have to work with our community partners. I just gave the great example of working with like a teenager or somebody under 18. We have to have that collaboration. And then we also look at natural supports like what exists out there. And it could be family, it could be church, it could be any number of things. These are just some of the medications that we use. And this is just, a handful of methadone. We have methadone clinics. I know there's one in Fayetteville, I believe. And Wayne County also has one. The one in Wayne County doses, I think, about 200 to 300 people per day. The one in Fayetteville, I understand, doses like 1,500 people a day. So they are a booming business. Okay. Naltrexone, that can be used for both alcohol and opiates. And buprenorphine, or you might also hear Subutex or Suboxone. That's another thing that we're seeing a lot in our world right now. Okay. So we have to monitor drug treatment. Okay. We know people are going to slip up, make mistakes, and that's okay. We want them to come back if they do. We never want them to feel like I'm scared to tell my counselor that I messed up. We don't ever want that. So we use drug tests, urine drug screens, sometimes blood, saliva, different things, so we can kind of look at therapeutic value. What's working for this person? What is not working? That's why it's important. Especially with our teenagers, we found this is really essential. A lot of our teenagers have no idea what they're doing. They think they're doing just marijuana, but when their drug tests come back, it's all these other things are positive. So they really don't know everything they're actually putting into their body. So it can be a good, say, life lesson, but therapeutic for that teenager. We always want to provide immediate feedback, not confrontational, but let them know, this drug screen came back and he tested positive for A, B, and C. Let's talk about that. What happened? What's working for you? What's not? And then I mentioned we're constantly reassessing. Are they getting the treatment they need? Or do they need a higher level of care? And remember those steps earlier? We may have to refer them to that higher level of care to help them out. So these are just some things that are effective, that are not effective. I'm not going to read each of these. Boot camp, that's one thing I hear families say, that I just take my kids to the Scared Straight program. Well, they've done statistically that kind of stuff doesn't even work. So these are some things that are not effective. I will tell you, there's that drug courts. This is under promising. We do have a drug court in Wayne, Lenore, and Greene counties, and it's highly effective. What that is a diversion. So if a child is involved with DSS, they come into the system and there's substance use allegations, the family can opt to participate in drug treatment court. And what that means is we work with the provider that's identified, and they do their treatment. We collaborate together. Our goal is to get them to complete treatment so they can get their child back, but kind of keep them out of the criminal justice system. However, if they are not compliant with what the treatment is, they will go into the criminal justice system. So that's been funded and really effective in some of our counties. But once again, at the end of the day, you know, it costs money to do stuff like that, and you have to have the buy-in of judges and things like that. So those are just some other things. This is also, y'all need to point this one out, MI, or motivational interviewing. That's a great skill that a lot of us are trained in for the mental health and medical world. And kind of simply put it, it's kind of meet the client where they are. If they're not really ready to get better yet, or they really want to work on maybe finding a job or improving their relationships, we'll start there with them so we can build that relationship and rapport, and then we can eventually get to their alcohol and drug use and talk about that a little bit more. But that's called motivational interviewing. This just shows you have to have treatment in place, you know, for a period of time for it to be, you know, shows some stable behavioral changes, and it shows you less than 90 days and more than 90 days, and some of the different cocaine, urine drug analysis positive, alcohol, or jail. So you'll see that jail, you know, isn't always effective. Jail can change some people, but a lot of our folks that they go as soon as they get out, if they don't have any treatment, they will get high again, unfortunately. I feel like they almost hold addiction to a different standard. You know, we know people in our field, or they're going to have setbacks. They're going to, you know, that's just what happens. But if you look at this data, drug dependence, type 1 diabetes, hypertension, and asthma, if you look at the setbacks or relapses, it's pretty equal. So if somebody with diabetes goes out and they get chocolate cake and they have really high blood sugar and end up in the emergency room, you know, how do we treat them versus the person that may have a relapse on alcohol or drugs? Do we treat them the same? Okay. So just kind of think about those rates kind of run together. Okay. So this last part is just about some co-occurring disorders. I knew we were going to have some folks in the criminal justice system, so I want to talk about this a lot. A lot of the people that present to us have more than one diagnosis, okay? We might be treating them for substance use, but we find out that they have a mental health diagnosis, and we have to kind of tease that out, okay? So what co-occurring disorders have, one or more disorders relating to the use of alcohol and or other drugs of abuse. The one or more mental disorders, they might have depression and maybe some anxiety. One disorder of each type that can be established independently of the other. And this is real common. People use substances to self-medicate. I can tell you, especially with people that have like schizophrenia and things like that, they will tell you they smoke marijuana because it helps with the voices. We hear that kind of thing quite a bit. And this is really important. Substances can also mimic mental health symptoms and are difficult to differentiate. I mentioned like people go into the emergency room with psychosis, with bath salts, or even cocaine or crystal meth. They present very paranoid at times, delusional. You know, people are out to get them, that kind of thing. So you don't know if that's a mental health symptom, a substance use symptom, or a little bit of both. It's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. We're always trying to figure that out. But we have to treat both. So these are just some of the diagnoses that we see with substances: attention deficit, bipolar, depression, PTSD, schizophrenia. I mean, that's just a couple of them, but it's pretty common, especially PTSD. I work with a lot of veterans that when they come back from being in Afghanistan, different things like that, they cannot cope with being in the real world again because of trauma they've had, things like that. They will drink just to cope with it. That's pretty common. All right. 29% of people with psychiatric illnesses have also had a substance use disorder at some time during their lives. Odds are 3 to 1 that a person with one substance use disorder will meet criteria in their lifetime for another psychiatric or substance use disorder. Overall, approximately 50% of persons in a psychiatric clinical settings will also have a substance use disorder. This is just more about the criminal justice system. Rates of mental health disorders are 4 times higher among prisoners than in the general population. I just want to share this real quick. A lot of times the jails are not really cut out for people with mental illness. You will see that. I remember working with a gentleman, and when I saw him, I always saw his alcohol issues, but I knew he had a schizophrenia diagnosis as well. I really didn't see those symptoms a lot until he went to jail, and I went to see him one time. And when he was closed in this 4x4 room, you could see him just escalate. You could see him talking and responding to the voices he was hearing. He got more agitated, more psychotic. So on the outside world, you saw a lot of the alcohol because that was just the behavior. But when he was cut off from the alcohol on the inside world in the jail, we saw those symptoms go up. So that was a real life learning experience for me. Rates of substance use are 4 to 7 times higher than in the general population. We see a lot of mentally ill folks in our prisons and jails. An estimated 3 to 11% of individuals in correctional settings have co-occurring disorders. And rates of co-occurring disorders are particularly high among the criminal justice system diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia. These are just some trends that we see. I won't read through each of these, but you'll see males, people involved in juvenile justice at an early age, history of legal problems, suicide attempts. A lot of these different things that we talked about this morning kind of makes the person go up risk-wise. We can always know if symptoms are due to primary psychiatric disorder, intoxication, withdrawal, or substance use. Okay? Many substance use symptoms resolve rapidly with detox and/or abstinence with no or short-term use of medication, and primary psychiatric disorders often require extended treatment with medication. Psychiatric illnesses increase the risk of developing substance abuse. Psychiatric symptoms may affect onset, duration, and response to treatment of substance abuse or dependence. Psychiatric symptoms may arise as a direct result of chronic substance use or withdrawal, and psychiatric disorders can mask substance use disorders. But then that's a lot of data. All right, so what can you do? These are some resources. This is some information about if you need help with a substance use disorder, that type of thing. These are lots of things, and I'll share with you. You can call East Point 24 hours a day. It's 1-800-913-6109, and I'll write that on this board for you. That is a clinician that can talk to you, give you resources, information, things like that, can refer you to programs. We also have the mobile crisis team through Easter Seals and that can come out to your home if it's a crisis situation. It's a plainclothes counselor, looks just like you and I, go into a home to do an assessment. They can go at 3 o'clock in the morning. We have a great relationship with the police department. They let us use their facility if we have safety issues, because sometimes it's not safe for our staff to go into a home or neighborhood at 4 in the morning. So they've been really great to work with us. We also have the walk-in clinic across from St. Regional Hospital called Building Bridges. You can always call EMS, local emergency rooms. There's 12-step meetings. Mental health first aid, I've got some information on the table out there. That is an 8-hour curriculum. It's evidence-based. There's an adult and a youth curriculum. And what that is recognizing signs and symptoms of mental health and substance use, and kind of what you say to a person and what you don't say while you're waiting for professional supports. CIT officers. My CIT officers, raise your hands. All right, so these guys have been through a 40-hour curriculum here at Sampson Regional. They have a great understanding of behavioral health issues and how to de-escalate our individuals in the community. So these guys are great resources right here. We have mental health specialty officers with probation here in Sampson County. The health department, Amy and I, back there are going next. They have lots of programs and they're going to share about that. They can also do testing, especially if somebody comes in with IV drug use, things like that. We try to refer them for testing to make sure that, everything's in control. DSS downstairs on the first floor has a resource hub that's excellent. They've got all kinds of brochures, information. You can visit them for more details. We're wrapping up here. There are Sampson County Co-op Extension programs. There's a program called Inspire that is for our teenagers with substance use issues in the juvenile court system. You can always talk to your medical doctor, especially if somebody is really resistant. They're like, I'm not seeing a psychiatrist. I don't want to do that. You may be able to get them to talk with their primary care doctor that they have a relationship with. That's a great start if they're refusing to do other things. Our education systems, right now we're getting them trained in mental health first aid in this county, so that's progress. We have our local JCPC that meets monthly. Guardian ad litem, our advocates, pharmacies, domestic violence programs like U-Care, shelters, vocational rehab, and other vocational settings. And finally, these are some of the prevention things. We have a Sampson County Substance Abuse Coalition that meets right here at the college, generally about once a month, once every 2 months, and B.G. Kennedy wasn't able to be here today, but he's the chair of that, and we've done Project Lazarus with the health department. We have a crisis collaborative that meets every quarter. There's the controlled substance reporting system, and I brought information about the Good Samaritan law. We try to educate our teenagers a lot on this. If they're at a party and somebody passes out, a lot of times kids get scared and they do nothing. They freak out, they're scared to call and get help, and they leave the person there and they die. And we don't want that. So we really try to educate our teenagers and young adults before they're in a situation like that, because we've seen so many kids die that way, that they can call 911, they can get help for that person, and if there's just a little bit of like drugs and that kind of thing on scene, they're not going to get charged. Now, if it's lots of, like trafficking and things like that, that's a whole different ballgame. But this is mostly for our kids that are really in a situation like that and on low risk. We also have Narcan, which Amy's going to talk about that. We have permanent drop boxes. Look, is it police department has the drop boxes here? If you have, say, an elderly person in your family that has oodles of pain medication that they just don't want to part with because they don't know where to give it to, they can drop it off at the local police department and have it properly disposed of. We really encourage that. We don't want people flushing it, things like that, and getting into our water system. That's a great resource. The STOP Act just came out a few months ago. Some of our health departments and some of our counties are doing needle exchange programs in collaboration with law enforcement. And finally, doing education, things like this, help you understand a little bit more about addiction. And there's a documentary called The Anonymous People that we can do a showing of. So those are just some of the things you guys can do.
And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Sampson Community College for having this, and we always love to get out and share information about our naloxone program to as many people as possible. I'm not a public speaker at all, so stop me anytime if you have questions. If I get too low, if I get too loud, I kind of get excited when I get to talking, so just calm me down if you need to, and we'll get started. Our objectives today are to learn what opioids are, that's what an epidemic is, to learn the effects of naloxone, how it's used, how it works, and what can we do. So we'll get started with what is an opioid, and I guess most people know, but it's a class of drugs that include illegal drugs as well. There's synthetic opioids, but there's prescription opioids. They're pain relievers. They're legal for the most part. The ones that we're seeing the biggest problem with are absolutely legal. So the legal addiction and then the inability to get that is what turns into the illegal problems with the heroin and things like that. They connect to receptors in your brain and your nerve cells. So they stop the pain. They're really effective in stopping the pain, but they also give a euphoric feeling, and some people really like that euphoria. And that's what brings the addiction. Some people, they get pain relief and that's it. And when they're done with pain, they put them away. Some people have pain relief and they like that euphoria, so they keep it going. And that's kind of how the opioid epidemic has progressed so quickly. I think this little definition came from the National Institute of Health, and I think it's interesting that it says they're generally safe. So we're prescribing these pills, like 600 million of these pills, that are generally safe. So I don't know, I try not to take things that I don't know are safe, and these are kind of safe. We're saying that it's possibly okay to take these and not get addicted, but how do you know if you're going to be that person? That's where the conflict comes in. You're going to have knee replacement surgery and you're going to have pain, so you need some pain medicine, right? How do you know you're not going to be the one that has that, wow, I need some more of that good feeling and continue on that path. So regular use, even as prescribed by a doctor, can lead to dependence, and that's what we need to remember. Even these things that are prescribed by a doctor can lead to addiction. Examples of opioids, and Courtney went over several of these. Heroin is the most often heard of illegal opioid, but then the Oxycontin, the hydrocodone, Vicodins, Percocets, fentanyl. Now there's carfentanil. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, with the elephant tranquilizers and all of that. They're all still forms of opioids. The street names, and I'm sure there's thousands more that I have no idea what they are. But those are the drugs, and even the medicine that is aimed to help get off the opioids are still opioids. You know, methadone, things like that. So it's a strong medication. And who takes them? Everybody. That's another problem with, you know, the hallucinogenics of the 60s. It was mostly the 20-year-old kids taking the hallucinogenics, and it was kind of controlled to that age group for the most part. With opioids, 68-year-old ladies who are having surgery become addicted to opioids. You know, the kids find it in grandma's cabinet and they're becoming addicted to opioids. It crosses socioeconomic lines, it's race, religion, gender, it doesn't matter who you are. There's no higher incidence of a rich person, a poor person, a black person, a white person. It doesn't matter. Everyone can be and has been affected by opioids. So the epidemic is the rapid increase in the use of prescription and non-prescription opioid drugs since the late 1990s. That's what has made it become an epidemic now. We've had pandemics and flu and different things like that, but this is an epidemic because of how quickly the problem is escalating. So we'll look at some numbers, and I like to look at numbers that are in my neck of the woods. So I'm born and raised in Harnett County. Now I'm a Sampson County girl, so I've got Sampson County numbers to share along with North Carolina numbers. So this is in the emergency department, the count of medications or drug overdoses seen in 2016 and 2017. These numbers come from North Carolina Detect, so they are up to date from when Luke pulled the report, which was Friday maybe. So these are current numbers in 2017 up to just this past week. Oops, it's been touchscreen. But you can see that North Carolina came down. But what did Sampson County do? We went on up, so we're on the rise. North Carolina did go up in opioid overdoses. So we've gone up, North Carolina has gone up. Now, 21 overdoses in the ED. What does that tell us? Well, that's not so bad, right? 21 people overdosed? That's just the ones who went to the ED. So that's not including anyone else that has not reported. Naloxone use, which we want to see these numbers go up if they have to, because that means they're getting the help that they need. So we went up to 27, the state went up to 3,200. Now the medication and drug deaths, this is the sad part to me. This came, Luke, I can't remember where those numbers came from.
North Carolina,
Injury prevention violence, yeah, that. It's not NC Detect, so that website will not put out their 2017 numbers until next year. But from 2015 to 16, we went from 9 to 13, and that's deaths. So that's 13 people in our little county that have passed away. And just opioid related, we went from 5 to 8. So we're on an increase, and that's not what we want to see. In North Carolina, it went from 1,100 to 1,500. So that's a huge increase. And when we see our 2017 numbers, I don't know that we're going to see any better. But we talked about naloxone here and how we want to see the increased use of naloxone. So let's talk about what naloxone is. Have any of you in here ever used naloxone? So naloxone is a medication that's an opioid antagonist. So it works on those same receptors that the opioids have attached to unattach the opioids. So if you have taken opioids legally, you've got some Percocet for knee surgery, and you've taken that and you've got pain relief from it. You know, in 4 hours you're going to get some more pain, you're going to take some more Percocet. If I were to give you a dose of naloxone, your pain would come back. It would remove that opioid from doing its job. So when someone has taken too much opioids and they're no longer breathing, their skin is blue, you can't wake them up, they're not moving, those are overdose signs, and you give them some naloxone, it's going to reverse that, so they'll start breathing again. You've got a chance to save a life if you have the naloxone, or the Narcan, whatever you want to call it. So it's an important drug to have. It's given IV in the emergency room. When people get there, they get it IV and it immediately starts reversing the effect of the opioid. So what do you think is going to happen when that opioid reversal happens? They're ready to fight. What else? Anybody who's seen somebody go through DTs or withdrawals or anything like that, they can start vomiting, they can be restless, they can start really becoming agitated with you because all of a sudden they don't know they were just not breathing, which is the same as being dead. I hate saying that, but that's what they were. So there's injections with syringe and needles, and what we get at the health department is the nasal spray. It's more expensive. We have found that people are more likely to spray something up your nose than they are to get a needle out and try to stab you with it. It's just too risky for some people to want to mess with needles and syringes, but I'll squirt something up your nose real quick and run away and see what happens. And that's what people are doing on the streets and with their friends. So we kind of talked about this already. What it attaches to in the brain is where the opioids are. So it causes the withdrawal. It reverses the effects of the opioids. So if they were in pain, they're going to have pain again. They're going to have that pain. They're going to be hurting. They're going to be restless, agitation. Some people say violent. So, nausea, vomiting, rapid heart rate, and the pain that if they took it for pain that they were initially in. Any questions about how naloxone works or what it does? What it does not do. You do not get high from naloxone. Some people think that because methadone kind of does the same thing, that naloxone is going to do this thing. You know, it's completely different. This is turning it off. So you will not get high. You cannot overdose on it. You need to give it, wait 2 to 3 minutes, and give it again. A lot of times the doses that people are taking to overdose are way more than a 0.4 milligrams of naloxone can handle. So chances are you're going to have to do it more than once. The most important thing we tell the people coming into the health department that we're dispensing this to, call 911. You know, shoot them up with it first, but immediately call 911 because you're going to need more. You're going to need resuscitation. You're going to need help, and 911 needs to be on the way. Yes, sir?
Well, who are you dispensing it to? Pretty much anybody?
Anybody that asks for it. Yes, sir. That's part of the Project Lazarus. Our pharmacy board in North Carolina has changed the laws. We do not have to have the person in front of us to get the prescription. I can give it to you because your son is on drugs and you just want to have it in case he overdoses at home. I can give it to anyone who has a family member. We've given it to people who have elderly parents who can't remember if they've taken their medicine or not, who take an extra dose by mistake. They want to have it just in case.
So, as a law enforcement agency, can we go to the health department and say we need some?
You can. Actually, Courtney has a contract, a connection, or something that she's getting naloxone for all of Sampson County law enforcement. I don't know, you're Harnett County. I don't know how you could, but if your health department doesn't offer it, we'll give it to you. We don't ask where you live, who you're for. We ask no questions. We encourage the person who's coming to get it. to understand how to give it. We encourage them to call us if they give it. We ask for a phone number, just so, you know, when it expires, we can call you up and say, hey, Johnny, your naloxone has expired, come get some more. We don't want to ride around with old naloxone in their car or purse or whatever. So we do ask for a phone number, but they don't have to give it. They don't have to give insurance information, income information. They just have to come in. We have tried our best to make it as easy as possible. We've had a few come in that think it's a painkiller. And they, you know, will say, for your family member, you know, she said, well, one lady was there because she was on high doses of pain. She had, I forgot, several joint surgeries. I don't remember what all she had, but she was on a lot of pain medication, and she said, well, I want that medicine in case I overdose. And I said, well, who lives with you? No one, I live alone, that's why I need it. I was like, well, if you overdose, give it to yourself. But she said, well, I want to take it before I overdose to keep overdose. So there's a lot of education that's involved in this medicine. People are scared of it, for one thing. Courtney?
And I'm glad you touched on it, it's not just for people with addictions, we have to give it to a 3-month-old baby. I mean, it's for the elderly, the confused, the dementia, I mean, it's not just for people with drugs, and I think that's the biggest misconception that's out there. Y'all probably need to call the Carolina Harm Reduction, y'all can probably get it for law enforcement through them, they offer a lot, I know that's where a lot of our kids, their East Point come through, but we get them off Harlem. I know Sampson County, Wikipedia has it, Sampson County Sheriff's Department and in narcotics unit, I just gave them some kits in the last couple of weeks. We're trying to get all emergency first responders to carry it, because y'all might be the first one to see it.
Right. And if y'all get there, if we call 911 and the police get there first, they can have that extra dose that we don't have on the streets to give to them. So there's a lot of education involved. People think they can get high from it. Another thing is people say, well, I'm not sure what drug little Johnny's on. He's on something. I know he's on something, so I want this to get him off of it. No, it doesn't work that way. It only works on opioids. So if little Johnny is on benzos or coke or crack or something, it's not going to work. It's not going to hurt you to give it to someone who's not overdosed on an opioid. It'll have no effect because there's nothing there for it to block. So if little Johnny has, you know, overdosed on cocaine, then this is no help. So we just need to know what we're getting when we're getting it, so we'll know how to give it. The lady who wanted it for herself obviously had been misinformed, and then the people who come in and say, well, I'm in a lot of pain, I need some of that Narcan. No, that's not, you know, that's going to make you have more pain if you're having things. So education is a big part of what we do, and trying our best to get as many kits out to as many people. Just to have, I mean, it wouldn't hurt for everybody to have one, even if you don't have a close family member or friend. You could be at the mall and see somebody not breathing, turning blue, have all the signs and symptoms of a drug overdose. Doesn't hurt to try. It doesn't hurt to try to bring them back.
And would a regular individual be covered under the Good Samaritan?
Absolutely, and I was going to get to that as well. It won't hurt, and you can't be held accountable for what you're doing and trying to save a life. And like Courtney said, we always mention that if you're with someone and there's drugs there and you think, I'm scared to call anybody because here's the drugs, and they're going to think, I had them or I didn't. No, you're not going to be in trouble for that. You're covered under the Good Samaritan law. It's worth it to save a life and make that call to 911 and get the help that you need. And call them quickly. Don't think, okay, now I've got to wait 2 minutes and see if it works. No, don't wait. Go ahead and call. Give the nasal spray, give the shot, give the whatever. But go ahead and call 911 because they're going to need more help in the ER. I mean, you're not going to do it all right there and then they're going to get up and walk home. It's going to be a process for them to get better from this overdose. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Okay, so what are we doing as a nation for this epidemic? October 26th was when Trump declared that we have an opioid crisis, and he declared it a national public health emergency under federal law. So public health, luckily here in Sampson County, we were already on this. We already had the naloxone in place, we're working on syringe exchange. We already were a little step ahead of becoming a public health emergency because we see the numbers increasing. When he did that, it allows the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services to waive some typical regulations, like giving the prescription to those that it's not intended for. I mean, you can't go anywhere else and get medicine prescribed to you for someone else, except because of these naloxone and things like that. It gives our state flexibility in how they can use the federal funds that are given, and it expands the ability and use of telemedicine. So we'll be able to do more. In Sampson County, we don't have a lot of therapists and psychiatrists and things like that to help, so we can use telemedicine more frequently to help those with addiction problems because of this public health emergency. If it would have been declared, there was this big controversy, he should have made it a federal state of emergency, and then we could have gotten disaster relief funds like we did with Hurricane Matthew or any of the other disasters that we've had. But he made it the public health emergency. We need that disaster money for disasters. This is a disaster, so I guess we're going to take it in baby steps and try to get it with the public health emergency. And if it becomes an actual federal state of emergency, then more money will be released to work on taking care of it. As a state, Governor Cooper and Mandy Cohen announced our North Carolina Opioid Action Plan in June of this year. Luke and I were at that summit. There's 6 strategies that they're trying to combat. They're reducing the supply of opioids, reducing the diversion of prescription drugs and the flow of illicit drugs, increasing community awareness, making naloxone widely available, expanding treatment and recovery systems of care, and measuring the effectiveness based on results. They added that just to make sure they were not just doing it for the sake of doing it. If they see that it's not working, they want to change it. So in October, they updated their measures to see where we are. And we're trending in the right direction. This is insane to me, but we're measuring the average rate of multiple providers episodes for prescription opioids. So this is when a patient receives more than or equal to 5 prescribers dispensing more than or equal to 5 pharmacies in a 6-month period. That's a lot of work. If you are going to 5 or more doctors and getting 5 more prescriptions at 5 more pharmacies, we're measuring that. I think it should be like 2. 1. I mean, I don't know, why do we need 5 different doctors giving me 5 different prescriptions from 5 different pharmacies? That's what we're measuring, and we're trending in the right direction. Since they started this to October, that's coming down. The number of opioid pills dispensed, that's an embarrassing number. North Carolina's got one of the highest, 675 million opioids dispensed, and that number decreased. So our providers are getting on board, and they're realizing that they can't keep giving all of this medication. The patients really want it, the providers won't happy patients, they're giving them a medicine bills. Hepatitis C cases are decreasing, so that's a good thing. That's what we wanted to see, that was one of our measurements. The naloxone reversal, so even by EMS and by regular people like us on the streets, is increasing. So that's a good thing, we're saving more lives. So we're trending in the right direction. The number of uninsured receiving treatment is increasing. So that's good. We need more treatment options. Where can they go in Sampson County for treatment? In-house, long-term, we need help treatment in Sampson County. Where do they go? Nowhere. So we need that. North Carolina was given $31 million to spend in 2 years on opioids alone. We are to spend $15 million per year, and 80% of that has to go to treatment. Sampson County's not seeing any of that yet, but we're hoping that we will, and that we'll be able to use it for treatment, close to home. I think Courtney would agree, it's easier to treat people close to where they are. Who wants to drive to Kalamazoo every day for treatment. So that's an issue that we're working on, and we're slowly but surely getting there. I'm interested to see the January numbers to see if we're still going in the right direction everywhere. Holidays kind of tend to make numbers change. So what do we do as a county? We increase naloxone access. We've done that, right? We've got it. We're telling people, we're doing ads on TV, on the little station, and radio ads, and newspaper ads. We're writing articles. We're coming to events like this. So we're telling people that we have the naloxone. Tell your friends we have it. Send them to me. I'm going to give it away. I like it. Drug take-back events. We just had one, I forgot when, but it was recently, maybe last month. There was an opioid summit here last year, or the end of, maybe it was the first of this year, that was sponsored by the Sampson County Substance Abuse Coalition. So there's a lot of things that we're doing. Just recently, we hosted a partners breakfast with law enforcement, DA, county managers, and everybody in one room together to talk about what we can do and how we can improve this for the citizens of our county. At the summit that we went to, there was a lot of, I think one thing we have to do is realize where we stand on this problem. I can say, well, these people need help because they're sick. Or I can say, it's a choice they made, they're on their own. It depends on where you fit personally. There was a guy on stage who spoke to us about his experience with naloxone, and he had been revived 6 times. I had in my mind, once you've been revived once, you're cured. Like, you are instant cured from any. I think if I were dead and I were brought back to life, I would be cured. But that's not the case. 6 times. I was thinking, when do you know your number's up? But he was saying that to say, well, his point of his conversation was to say, law enforcement knew him. 911 knew him when they said, 101 South Main Street, oh, Johnny's OD'd again. He said, at which point in time do law enforcement and EMS take their time to get there? Like, who determines he's had enough naloxone? We've saved him 4 times. How many more times are we going to save him? So you have to determine where you stand personally and your views and your inner gut on how you handle that. Are these people sick with a disease? At that summit, nobody could say the word drug addict. Like, I always thought that's what they were called. Like, people who are on drugs, they were drug addicts. I had no idea that the proper word is substance use disorder. It's a disorder. And we have to think of it on that terms in order to get the proper help that we need. But you have to know where you stand. If you stand on, they asked for it, they got it, then how you react when you're confronted with this is going to be different than if you stand on, these people are sick just like the diabetic. They need help just like if you saw someone in a diabetic coma, anybody in the land would give them a piece of candy and say, well, their sugar needs to come up. We need to help them. But how many of you will stop and spray some naloxone up some drug addict's nose laying on the street? I mean, that's what our mentality is. Well, they asked for that. They must have wanted to get high. So you've got to really know where you stand and know what your gut feeling is and how you're able to help. And then determine what you can do to make it better. Because if it hasn't affected you yet, it will. You've just been the lucky one, that hasn't had it yet. So with that being said, what ideas do you have that we can do to improve this problem?